Hello, BookTube. This is the BookTube Slow Read tag. This tag was created by Neil Griffiths, and I was tagged by Ernest Lee Eston, both of whom are uh, booktubers that I really enjoy watching. So I seem to have been fortunate in the tags that I've received lately, and this one would hold a special place, I think. Um, what are the five works of fiction, excuse me, which in your opinion require the reader to slow down and engage the work on a deeper level? And I think this is very important. Um, when I read Clive Cussler, maybe not as important. It's sitting around a campfire, rabble rousing story, let's have fun. And I love those. Got this nice little shadow going on the forehead. That happens with fellas with hair like me. When I'm reading different types of literature, that rabble rousing and fast paced type of story maybe isn't so appropriate. I like both kinds of stories, and the world isn't made up of left or right, so multiple kinds of stories. Sometimes slow reading works, sometimes it's maybe not appropriate to what you're reading. Some poetry, a limerick, maybe something by Yeats, maybe you'd read it different, or E. Cummings, or whatever. The reading style should match the reading material. Just like I believe there are not only great writers, but there are great readers. And to be a great reader is just as rare as being a great writer. My background as the son of a Episcopal priest. I grew up on the campus of a seminary, influenced by all those folks. And they didn't only read seminary books. I mean, we read a lot of other stuff, and they introduced me to Tolkien and Heinlein and Asimov and all these things. But they also understood, and I guess I took it in from the atmosphere, that you read according to what you're reading. And when I was older and out of my undergraduate years, I did a couple degrees in theology. And there you learn exegesis, exegetical reading, and all the forms of criticism that come with it. And you learn to really dig deep into the text because there's riches there. Now, if you're really digging deep into the text and reading slowly the Louis L'Amour novel, you're missing the point. But the treasures are there in some types of literature, and it's a treasure to read Louis L'Amour. It's just a different treasure. But what Neil Griffiths does is he brings that sensibility to BookTube, and I very much appreciate it. As does Ernest Lee Eston, I believe. So I'm going to pick five books, and his tag restricted it to novels. So I'm going to pick five. If you asked me in 3 weeks, would it be the same five? Probably not. There's so many of them. So the first one I'm going to pick is Nikos Kazantzakis. He had a large body of work. This is Freedom or Death. And you can even tell, but the cover art's fantastic on this old paperback. I'll look at the title page and see what the information is on it in a minute. But Kazantzakis was from Crete, which had been held by the Turks. And his take on that is interesting throughout his life. Kazantzakis has gotten some pretty rough press, at least in the United States, because of some of his writings. The Last Temptation of Christ would be the primary one. I like quite a bit of his stuff. Some of it I can't wrap my head around. He's a complex writer, which is why you should read him slow. St. Francis, I never totally got. The Rock Garden, things like that. But Freedom or Death, for a person like me who reads a lot of adventure novels, nautical fiction, has that edge of action. Where he's able to speak to you if that's what you enjoy. Yet, if you read it like Clive Cussler or Jack Higgins, you're going to miss a lot. There's a lot of history here. Kazantzakis was consumed, in the best sense of the term, by religion. He was a very deep thinker, deeper than myself, so I have to work at it. And it's in translation. Another stumbling block. So I'll give you a little idea just from the back of the book. Freedom or Death is a novel on a heroic scale, and I believe the word heroic is important, about the rebellion of the Greek Christians on the island of Crete against their Turkish conquerors. Against a background of compelling reality, the odor of lemon trees and saddle leather, guerrilla fighters, pack animals, and tobacco, Turkish bazaars, and Aegean ports, Kazantzakis poses mighty opposites, and that's important in this book. Captain McCallus and his blood brother, the noble Turk, Nuri Bey, fighting within a relationship of love and hatred, vendetta, and patriotism. These emotional connections can sometimes in this novel seem so extreme that you wonder if they're real. But in that world, they're real. So Kazantzakis was born on Crete in 1885 and died in Germany in 1957. This is a Ballantine book. Let's see. It had a preface by A. Den Doulard, Ballantine Books, New York. It was published, the one I have here is the third printing of 1969. It's an old paperback. It's already starting to color. It's just a copy I could find. And it's translated by Jonathan Griffin. And anybody who reads Greek could tell me if it's a good translation. I just know it caught me. But I had to read it slow. I mean, I have a fairly decent knowledge of theology. I have a fairly decent knowledge of history. But they are limited. So I had to read it slow, and I got so much from this book. It changes the way I see things there. So, I like Kazantzakis. Report to Greco. Helen Kazantzakis' book about Nikos. I want to read a little bit of the beginning here. Captain McCallus gnashed his teeth. He usually did so when wrath took charge of him. Captain Wildboar was his apt nickname in Megalocastro. With his sudden rages, his deep, dark eyes, his short, stubborn neck and jutting jaw, the heavy, broad-boned man was really like a wild boar rearing for the spring. And that plays out throughout. And for somebody who reads like I do, I'm going to miss a lot if I don't read it slowly. So that would be my first choice. My second choice for this was a book that influenced me quite a bit when I was a young man. And that's Narcissus and Goldmund by Hermann Hesse. And this is, what do I forgot about this? What a wonderful picture of him on the back. And I like a lot of his books, and I think a lot of his work hits you differently at different ages. Steppenwolf was something different to me when I was a young man than it probably would be now. The Glass Bead Game, which is an intellectual exercise that, if you can read it, read it. And Ernest Lee Eston, who tagged me on this, has done a great job on it, so I'm not even going to bother. But this is a story, a medieval story, of two men that are opposite of each other. Goldmund's a student at the Maribron cloister and is impressed by the character of Brother Narcissus and confides that he too wishes to become a monk. And Narcissus, wisely, I think, advises him that he's totally unsuited for monastic life. So this is a story of an artistic personality opposed to a monkish personality, I guess is how you'd say it. There's different kinds of intellect involved, different types of creativity. My editions is translated by Ursula Molinaro. It's Farrar, Straus and Giroux, New York, 1968. This is a book from the 1930s. I've always remembered this. Outside the entrance of the Maribron cloister, whose rounded arch rested on slim double columns, a chestnut tree stood close to the road. Yeah, don't mess it up like that. It's one I go back to. So not only read it slow, but maybe reread it. And I would, of all of Hesse's books, this for me is the one I love. The next book for reading slowly is Milorad Pavic, Dictionary of the Khazars, male edition. Had a dust jacket at one time. It suffered greatly. There's the end papers. If you'll notice those symbols, they make sense with the book. Let's do this here. So, Dictionary of the Khazars, a lexicon novel in 100,000 words, Milorad Pavic, translated from the Serbo-Croatian by Kristina Privacevic, Zurich. This is the male edition of the dictionary. The female edition is almost identical, but not quite. Be warned that one paragraph is crucially different. The choice is yours. Alfred A. Knopf, New York, 1988. I chose the male edition. Now I wish I had the female edition so I'd find out what he's talking about. Here lies the reader who will never open this book. He is forever dead. Lexicon Kozri, a dictionary of the dictionaries of the Khazar question, reconstruction of the original 1691 Dobmanis edition, destroyed in 1692, including its most recent revisions. So, the dictionary is divided into the red book, which is Christian sources on the Khazar questions, the green book, Islamic sources on the Khazar question, and the yellow book, which are Hebrew sources on the Khazar question. And let's see if I can find a page so you can see. The book is beautifully done. Red book, Christian sources on the Khazar sources. And there's layers in this book. And yeah, it's almost obvious that it requires slow reading. The Khazars were trying to decide which of the three great religions that they were faced with that they were going to choose. And I won't get into any deeper than that. If you can find a copy of this book, depending on what kind of reader you are, you may enjoy it. And I enjoyed it. I've kept a copy for a lot of years. The next volume is Jose Saramago, The History of the Siege of Lisbon. An old paperback edition. Who's this? Haverhill Press in London. A novel translated from the Portuguese by Giovanni Pontiero. I've read quite a bit of Jose Saramago. First published in the Portuguese with the title Historia, my eyes are bad, de Cerco de Lisboa in 1989. First published in Britain in 1996 by this press. Until you attain the truth, you will not be able to amend it. But if you do not amend it, you will not attain it. Meanwhile, do not resign yourself. From the Book of Exhortations. So, this is a story of a humble proofreader for a Lisbon publishing house. Takes it upon himself to insert a negative into the sentence of a history book, thus effectively leaving that history entirely rewritten. Whatever the experts have hitherto chosen to say, the visiting crusaders did not help the King of Portugal to recapture Lisbon from the Saracens in the 12th century. This act of gross insubordination, which might have ended Raimundo Silva's career, has instead the unexpected result of making his superior, the fetching Maria Sara, fall in love with him, and in his middle age, romance blossoms. Under her impetus, the humble proofreader rewrites the history of the Siege of Lisbon in a style graphic enough to satisfy the most exigent reader of historic romances. So, Saramago won the 1998 Nobel Prize for Literature. And this book, about the power of words, among other things, I've always really enjoyed it. I have reread it several times, and it's another case where a reread, and slow reads go hand in hand. I mean, I'm not a big rereader of fiction. I reread a lot of other things, but fiction not as much. And if it has enough layers and I've changed enough throughout time, then I feel that it may be worth it. So in this case, I think it is. And then it's 5 volumes. I hope this video hasn't gone on too long. Is Roberto Colasso, The Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony. I read a lot of Roberto Colasso. I really enjoy his writing. So it's The Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony, Roberto Colasso, translated from the Italian by Tim Parks. Alfred A. Knopf, New York, 1993. Little intro. These things never happen, but are always. Sallust of Gods in the World, of the World. So this is a retelling of Greek myths. I think it was quite a big deal when it came out. I've read a lot of stuff he's done since then. Much of it equally as good. He's a publisher at Adelphi in Italy. So I would think it would help to have a background in reading mythology, reading theology, and reading some of the original classics to really appreciate the nuances of this book. But that's what it takes sometimes, is that thing that makes a great writer or makes a great reader is the foundation that's been laid. And you can always build that foundation. You can read the Metamorphoses, Homer, the Gospels, whatever the classic happens to be for the book you're looking at, to get those layers, and to read them slowly, to read them maybe not entirely exegetically, but to give them what they deserve. And like I say, I read some things slow, and other things I enjoy greatly reading straight through. If it's a thriller, I'm reading it one way. If it's a sea story, I'm reading it one way. If it's a ballad so I'd like to tag anybody who's interested in this. It's a very interesting topic, and I very much enjoyed doing it. So thank you, BookTube.